Back to the Future, the animated series, episode 6, Go Fly a Kite. Now this was a pretty interesting episode because it actually did not have, a big focus on, the characters go back in time because of this specific thing. It was actually like pretty much a fluke. What ends up happening in this episode that kind of kicks things off is Jules and Verne are arguing. And Jules was kind of harsh. It was really funny because all I could think of was like if someone made like a YouTube video about it, it would be different dialogue. But basically everything he said was like, Verne, basically it was like, you don't look like our parents, you're dumb, which is unlike our parents. You don't even have, I don't know why this is a big deal because Jules doesn't have one either. But he was like, you're dumb, you don't look like mom, you don't look like dad, and you don't have a hoverboard like Marty. And I was like, well, neither does he. But he was saying all this stuff because he was mad at his brother. He was like calling him super stupid and like ugly and stuff. And it really made me laugh. I was like, man, he is being super harsh. It was like super nerdy though, the way he was explaining it because he's like the smart one. But I was like, man, if you change the dialogue and made it just a little bit harsher, this would be some really funny stuff. But it, it can't be that serious. It's just, kids animated series from the 90s. But it was super funny. I was like, man, he is destroying his brother right now. Like, they're not related. And then ultimately it comes down to the reason it's like that is because clearly I'm actually, a brown and you're not. You're adopted. And it was a huge insult, but he was like, you're probably even a tannin. And I don't know why he said that. That was super harsh. And that freaked out Verne. So he assumed that he was adopted from everything that Jules said to him. And this is one of those things, and I think I mentioned this before, where Doc did something, and it was like, man, sometimes he does some stuff where it's like they make him seem like not the greatest, greatest parent. And this is one of those moments because after the boys, it's not really an argument, but after Jules tries to, convince his younger brother that he's adopted, Verne actually goes, to Doc. He's like, he's freaking out. And he's like, am I adopted? Like, I'm freaking out right now. Like, am I a tannin? And so the first thing he says is like, what gave you that crazy idea? And it was like, one of the other things that Jules mentioned was that there's like no baby pictures of Verne. It's like because, they just kind of picked him up so they didn't have baby pictures. So that was what he said to Doc. And he's like, no baby pictures. He was like, oh, well, this should help. And so he presses a button and some stuff's about to come up. And this like huge alarm goes off. And I was like, oh, maybe something went wrong and there, some crazy issue with the time stream or something. And it ended up just being that it was time for dinner. And he just took off. He was like, all right, no big deal. Like, we got to go eat dinner. And Verne is like, but, what about my baby pictures? Like, I think I'm adopted. Like, help me out here. And he's like, he doesn't actually say, he doesn't say what I just said. All he says is like, what about my baby pictures? And Doc is like, after dinner, like, it can wait out until after dinner. And I was like, what in the world? Like, that's just a crappy thing to do. So it was kind of funny. But at the same time, it's like, what in the world? Like, his son is freaking out. And he's like, the alarm goes off. It's like, it's time for dinner. I gotta go. So after that ends up happening, Verne ends up sitting on the machine that Doc was typing into, and Doc was actually looking into some stuff with Benjamin Franklin. So I don't understand. I guess it was just this random thing where it was some device that Doc invented. They don't really explain it, but it's like this random thing where it'll print out a picture of a famous person, and then it'll have you in the picture. And so I guess that was one of the things to prove that, he actually, they have baby pictures of him. Because at some point in time, although it was kind of weird because when, they actually go back in time, Doc does end up with meeting Ben Franklin. And they don't seem to actually know each other. So I thought, I was like, okay, maybe this will connect because they had a picture of Benjamin Franklin. And he's holding Verne as a baby. Like, it's actually like a really young Verne. And I was like, okay. So at first I thought it was like a fake thing, and then I was like, oh no, it's him actually in the past. That's a baby picture, duh, it makes sense. But then it never connected where it was like when they go back in time to actually save Verne because they get a message and they realize that he went back in time because he thought Benjamin Franklin was his real dad. They're like, oh, we have to go back in time and save him. Electricity's not working. Like as soon as Verne went back in time and he screwed up the kite flying experiment, all the electricity in the town kind of just went away. And so, and it was really fun. I actually love this line. But the only reason Marty's in this episode is because the electricity goes out. And Jules answers the door and he's like, oh hey, I just came over here because the power was on the whole town, and I just assumed Doc was had something to do with it. And I was like, that's actually a really good line because it was just so funny to me. Like it was super simple. It was like, I just figured he destroyed something and wiped out all the electricity in the town, so I wanted to check it out. And, like that was the only reason Marty ended up in the entire episode because he just assumed it had to be Doc's fault. So that's how he ends up with the family, and they get this message because Doc, in the time that the electricity went out and stuff, he ends up transferring everything to steam power. So he transfers all the appliances and stuff. It's just like a bunch of pipes and stuff going through the kitchen, from like the blender to the toaster to the refrigerator, and it's all steam powered. And like Clara has to like put coal into the oven and close it and stuff to have fire, like steam. So that's how they end up getting this message when they find out that where they find out Verne actually went back in time. And so he's like, I found out who my real dad was, and he puts like this baby picture up like super close to the camera, and all you can see is him as a baby. And so he's like, so I'm taking off, and you can tell Jules that he has to take out the trash now because that was like one of the little bets they had. So it was pretty interesting. It was like, okay, well, we got to go back in time. So of course they use the train, which naturally Doc mentions is steam powered. So they go back in time. They're going to save Verne, and like I said, there was no real connection to the actual picture of Verne being, like baby Verne with Benjamin Franklin. There was no connection where Doc shows up and it's like, hey, it's been a while or anything like that. It was kind of weird. It was like, that was supposed to be a baby picture of him with Benjamin Franklin, and it had no tie. It was one of those things where it was like, why'd they show it that way? But maybe I'm just thinking like too modern. It's a kids show from the 90s. But I don't know. It was just one of those weird things where it's like, okay, this should totally come back later, or we find out that the reason they have that baby picture is because Doc and Clara possibly actually took Verne back in time to meet Benjamin Franklin, which makes sense, especially in Doc's case. And it just never came back, and I was like, that's just so weird. It was just so weird to me, but it was still a good episode for sure. Like once they end up going to save Verne, it's actually just Doc and Marty. Like Jules does end up staying behind, but Doc and Marty do end up going back in time. They're dealing with like one of the redcoats, like he's bothering them. I don't think they specifically say that he's a Tannen, but I think that was kind of meant to be the point. But he's bothering them, and ultimately they just end up escaping, and then they have like this sort of emotional moment between Doc and Jules, or Doc and Verne, where Verne is freaking out. Like he ends up leaving Benjamin Franklin's house because he's thinks that's his dad. And so he ends up taking off to like this bell tower, and they, all their crazy issues with bell towers and, the Browns. So he runs up to the top of the bell tower, and Doc thinks that he fell over because he like, Verne knocks a bunch of debris to the ground, and he starts freaking out like, I think my son is dying, and, he's under a bunch of rubble. And he starts talking to these random people like, hey, can you help me out? And they're just dumb. I don't know what their deal was. They were just acting like, no big deal. And so that's what helped Verne realize that Doc must actually be his dad, because he was freaking out like crazy. He was like, wow, he really cares. He must actually be my dad. And then he actually does end up falling over, but he's holding on, and Doc goes to get him, and then Doc falls over. Like he catches him at the last second, and then he falls over, and he gets his coat caught on the clock tower. And by the time they fall, Marty comes along, and actually Einstein was with them as well. And they both come along in the train, scoop him up, and then they're right before they're about to shoot back to the future. They of course have to make sure that Benjamin Franklin does the the key kite experiment. So they basically make a thunderstorm. They just like spray some water outside of the train. They're they're already up in the clouds. They have Einstein like banging on a pot to make thunder noises, and then Marty picked up, or not Marty, but Doc picked up some crazy static machine that apparently existed like a super long time ago. I don't know what this is. I would assume this is an actual thing that used to exist, but basically it would create static electricity. It's basically like one of the little the little lightning ball things, but you have to actually crank it, and it would make static electricity, or like a static cling, by sucking the air into a vacuum and doing some other science stuff with it that I just didn't understand. But it was basically like, all he said was it sucked air into a vacuum, and that made like static electricity. And I was like, I feel like there's some steps in this, but that's pretty much all he said. I assume there has to be more than that. But they're cranking up this machine. Then Marty actually hits the button or he touches the globe to transfer the electricity through him, through Doc, and then Doc has like a lightning rod that shoots down to the kite, and then that successfully completes Benjamin Franklin's experiment, and then that allows them to go Back to the Future. And so everything's solved there. Ultimately, Jules does decide that he's going to be, nicer to his younger brother, because he definitely called him stupid at the end, because Verne said something about getting like the last piece of cake or whatever, and it was like a souffle. And so Jules was like, "It's a souffle, you sub stupid." Like, I don't even know what sub stupid. Like, he's so dumb, he's below stupid. But he was like, "You sub stupid something." And then he stopped and was like, "Maybe I should kind of call him." Like, he kind of backed off and was like, "Never mind." And so he was being nice to his little brother because he freaked him out and made him almost get lost back in time. So it was kind of funny where he was like, he went right back into like the evil older brother a little bit in this episode. But definitely a decent episode for sure. I would love to see more of Clara. I feel like she has not really had a big part in the series so far. She's only been in like one episode really, which was the medieval episode, and that's pretty much it. She hasn't had like a really huge part. She was in the medieval episode as well, or not the medieval one, but the witchcraft episode where like everyone was trapped back in time. But she didn't have like a huge part to play in that really, and that mostly that was like Marty's episode anyway. And I didn't really focus on anyone else, but I would love to see an episode that focused a bit more on Clara. Like, she was referenced, I think, in the second episode when they went back to the Civil War, and it was like, oh, this is her her uncle or whatever, because that's when she was like 9 years old during that actual time period. And so it was like, okay, like she's been referenced and seen, but she doesn't really do much. And in this episode, she didn't do much. Like, they show her in the house a little bit because she's there with Jules, and they're like trying to cook food by throwing like coal, and they're like breaking. They like break all the chairs in the house to actually create a fire to like cook this souffle. And Jules goes up to her and he's like, this is the penultimate chair in the house, which means it's like the chair before the last chair in the entire house. She's like, "That's okay." And she slammed that thing down so hard it just shattered into pieces. And then she threw, she was about to like throw a little piece in there. It was like, the souffle is almost done. It was just funny to me that they're just going through and having to, do it that way. But we'd love to see a bit more of Clara coming up and, more, some of the upcoming episodes. I was about to say some more recent episodes, but in the next couple of episodes, I would love to see Clara take a focus. Even if she was by herself, just in general, like maybe her and Marty, that would be an interesting team up. But we'll have to see a bit more of Clara. But this is still a pretty good episode, and I just love the opening with Jules just tearing his brother down. Like I said, if they kind of upped the dialogue to some modern day stuff, and it was definitely harsher. It wasn't like super scientific and nerdy. It would have been harsh because it was just like, "You're ugly, you don't look like mom, you don't look like dad, you dumb, you don't have a future flying hoverboard or anything like that." And it was just like, man, he is tearing into his little brother right now and just destroying him mentally. Like, that's the type of stuff that scars people. But it was just super funny. But good episode. I don't know why that made me laugh so much. It's super dark when I really think about it, but it was funny to me. But I did enjoy this episode, of course. We'd love to know what you guys thought about it, so please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts about it, least favorite parts about it, if you happen to have seen the episode. If you have any random questions about the episode, of course, with this episode or the series in general not being that easy to find, I'll answer any questions that I can about the episode. I can't even remember. The live action portion for this, kind of like the last episode where it was like the drag thing. For this, it was static cling. There wasn't that much to it. It was like, here's how you make, static clean. It was super simple. When you rub a balloon on your hair and then you put it on another balloon and it creates that static clean. That was it. Like, that was the experiment. It was like Bill Nye the Science Guy. He put a balloon on his head and then it was like another balloon that was hanging down on a string, and he made the balloon float because he put the one that was on his head close to that. And it was like, ooh, like, check this out. And it was just like, okay, it was like, it's weird going off the first couple episodes where it's like, man, he's like making magnets out of lemons and crap like that, and it was just really interesting. And then the last two episodes, it was kind of just like, oh, okay. I mean, he put a plastic parachute on a car for the last one for to show drag, and then in this one it was just like static clean. It was like, it's really simple, so I understand that, and it is still scientific. It's just like, it's not as cool as like he just made a battery out of lemons and stuff. So it's really weird that I'm having that odd. It's not even a complaint. It's just like, oh, it's not the lemon battery trick, which I didn't know was even a thing. So, I actually learned something there, and that was like, for drag and static cling, it's like, oh, that's actually what I expected. Whereas like stuff that I already knew like years and years ago. But some stuff I have actually learned, like the the battery lemon thing. That's the first thing that comes to mind. So I'd never seen that. I've seen like the potato thing. I'd never seen it where it's like the citrus and the lemons, and you put it around like an iron thing and stuff, and like, I'd never seen that before. I've seen the potato stuff a million times, never seen it done with lemon. So that kind of like really shocked me because I was like, huh, never heard that one before. The potato is like the be all end all of like vegetable batteries. And then it's like, oh, check it out. You can do it with lemons too. So I don't know why I always go back to that, but it was kind of a big deal when I saw it because I was like, I actually learned that. And then for these, it was like, it's stuff I already knew. You know, some of that, and that's happened before as well. But still a good episode. You know, it doesn't. It's a show from the '90s. It's a kid show from the '90s based on 3 films. So I'm not expecting to learn like crazy science or anything like that. But still a good episode. Like overall, it was definitely entertaining. But of course, like I said, if you have any questions about it, or if you actually have something you can contribute about, you know, what you like or don't like about the episode, please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.